The other characters that are following the spirit of carnival are a depiction of costumes, of clothing that would be worn in that period of the late 1800s. So you would see women wearing those things to the fancy balls. And now you see the minstrels. What would a party be without music? These are actually the earliest depictions of the minstrel. Of course, this character has evolved over the years and became more of an Americanized version of minstrels with painted faces and flat hats. But this is the original, authentic depiction of the minstrel.
Very interesting.
All of the instruments were made with wire and paper mache and hand painted.
And we know the fiddle, or that type of instrument, was one of the early sounds of carnival before it was moved or removed by the tambu bamboo, which eventually went into the steel pan. So the fiddle and the shak.
Yes, because the Africans had what they had, and they could only use what instruments they could use. The section that you are viewing now is called Sumari. Now this is an interesting section. The indentured servants, when they came, were allowed to keep their festivals. And one of those festivals was the celebration of the goddess Durga. It is stated that Shiva, the god and the creator, turned the goddess Durga into a horse so that she could be worshipped because of a particular task that she did for him, and he wanted to show appreciation. So East Indians would portray this character. And of course, in the masquerade, it became a popular character because of the ability to do the dance and the movement. And now you see the fireman, again done in gold, with the pokers. When the steamships came, the sailors had their responsibilities. And one such responsibility was keeping the fires stoked, working in the engine rooms.
Very interesting.
This became a very popular characterization because sailors would do a dance and they would poke their pokers and move back and forth, and they could create so much theater on the streets with this. So this became a very popular character.
A lesson in carnival history by Brian McFarlane as we enjoy Resurrection the Mask. And with me providing such brilliant commentary and insight is Mr. Maurice Chevalier, who is dressed, he's all in costume, resplendent in bronze and gold, and he says he is a gentleman Jim.
That's correct.
I got that correct.
As you can see, even though we've been out here all day, everyone is enjoying themselves and having a wonderful time at it.
Resurrection the Mask, bringing back all the traditional carnival characters. We've seen the firemen, we've seen the Borokeets, we've seen Dame Lorraine, we've seen the Midnight Robbers. There was a huge ceremonial procession at the beginning, and now we are getting some more. These
are a costumed character that's created Brian's storytelling. And what happens is these women would be called Madame Column, which is a character that tells stories to children about the mass and where it came from, and about some of these characters, some of what we are doing today. But again, because the children would sit at her feet and listen it attentively, the depiction conveys them in gold and coppers and bronzes. A beautiful depiction of Madame Column, the storyteller who tells the story of the old mass, the resurrected mass. Somewhat of a French old lady who would be aware of all the history and telling the story. Tell me about the fabrication, the fabrics used, the kind of detail we're seeing on these dresses. Well, this is fabric that is here in Trinidad. Brian simply looks at textures and texturizes everything so that he gives the most effect. That the fans were hand done. Interestingly, these fans were done by Brian himself. And the materials, there's lame, and there's silk, and there's a lot of sequin, and yes, we just got a glimpse of the Moko Jumbies, more dressed up than we would usually see our Moko Jumbies. Well, because they lead in they lead in the Grande Dame Lorraine, the queen of the band. This character was a character where, when the Dame Lorraine was originally portrayed, she was usually led in by a gentleman or two, a very thin, slender gentleman. It allowed for the Dame Lorraine's physical shape to be more prominent. So this is the queen of the band that is being led in by these characters that are dressed in finery.
And I know we're seeing her very pronounced features, and I remember from the Queen competition, I know Gabunda stands for the derriere, right?
That's correct.
I remember that one.
She has it enlarged behind.
And they would say, what a Gabunda she has.
Yes. Again, this character was carried by the individual on 7-foot stilts, and you can see all the resplendent colors: gold, coppers, bronzes. She also has a pretty large.
We know what they are. A pretty large two of those.
Yes. And then comes all the rest of the Dame Lorraines. Some of these characters, most of these in the original portrayals of Dame Lorraines, were done by men. And as you can remember from the lady of the manor, they have taken the costuming somewhat in the best that they could from what she depicted. But they still showed the elements, enlarged physical features to portray what they were seeing and a part of their lives, and to mimic and make as much fun as they could of what they were experiencing. They all carried their parasols with strips of fabric, whatever they could find and however they could make them. But they too are in resplendent colors here. Coppers and bronzes and golds.
The bronze, the gold.
With a touch here or there of a golden orange kind of.
And much of the early costumes of Carnival, of the African ancestors, the history of Carnival, really poking fun at officialdom, poking fun at the European tradition that they saw, and reinterpreting that, as we see with the Dame Lorraine, overemphasizing the madam's bustline and derriere, to make it, to get a little laugh out of it.
Yes, yes. Interestingly, the characters here, the Dame characters, weren't only confined to the portrayal of women. There were men who also portrayed the characters of the slave masters themselves, or the other people who were the overseers. But that has died over the years. And what you see now is a section coming on called the Misbehaving Sailors. Sailors, when they landed in the port, would go out carousing and drinking and carrying on. So all of the bands of the day and the era in the 1920s became known as misbehaving sailors. But of course, to depict the differences, someone decided, let's do something different. Let's create an edge. Let's give ourselves a mask or a headpiece.
So tell me about that headpiece.
Now, this headpiece is interesting in that the idea came about that they could put on these extended noses, somewhat representative of a certain part of the male anatomy.
I would not even ask you where.
And so they became known as the suck-my-nose sailor. Of course, when someone said suck-my-nose, they meant something. I'll leave that to your imagination. So it was a character that was very much enjoyed to be played by men, and certainly to be played by sailors. So Brian thought he would bring it back to let us know that this was a part of the carnival. The misbehaving sailors and the powder and everything that goes with it. And behind them directly are the true king sailors. One of the characters there is actually Austin Miller, a very famous of the Trinidadian king sailors.
And we see them doing the traditional
sailor dance.
The king sailor dance.
Ralph Dyett, Austin Miller, George Miller, and Michael Miller. Young king is Michael Miller. George Miller, one of the masters. Ralph Dyett, the dancing master. And Austin Miller making a statement, remember Mass. King Sailor, remember Mass and remember the dance. That is Austin doing the dance for you. The true depiction of the King Sailor dance.